Everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Global Running Academy show. I'm Eric Orton, and today we're going to talk about heart rate.
Well, I think for me, I had no heart rate training prior to this working with you. And when we implemented, I got the heart rate strap and started like paying attention to my heart rate and running like that. I felt like I understood my running more. I understood my body and my perceived efforts and all these things. And then the first race we had at New Zealand in Tarawera, you gave me like a roadmap of like, hey, run this section at this rate, run this section at this rate. If you get above this, wait till it comes down to this. So I had like a real specific plan, and I never once felt like I was going to blow up in that race because I was running certain like sections at that heart rate zone, and I had the consciousness of like, wow, if I didn't have that like number, I might be going outside of that number, and I might not, be able to finish this race like I could.
Well, and
So I
that
found it
also
helpful.
that goes back to the training too, because I'm having you do that in training, and you now know what 160 feels like. You know what
Yeah,
150 feels like, and it's creating this awareness and going back to the questions I get about why 8 training zones. Um, Most of the times I'm getting those questions because people can't program 8 training zones into their watch. It's not
yeah,
out of a physiological curiosity. It's, hey,
interesting.
I only have slots for 5. What do I do? And what
Yeah,
I tell them is, in 2 or 3 weeks, you should have your heart rate zones memorized, because you
yeah,
should
I
be
have
always
them.
looking and monitoring and engaging how you're feeling from a perceived exertion relative to your heart rate. And that's super great knowledge for racing and what you
Yeah,
understand as potential.
yep.
And
Um,
so that's what's so helpful once you get into the race, is that this is nothing that you haven't done in training, and you really know what 150 feels like, what 160 feels like. And if you're running for 10 hours, hey, 160 is going to be too hard, you got to back off. It becomes such a crucial tool to start to understand what's really going on with your body, even from a fueling standpoint. If you're in a long race or climbing a mountain, and you've kind of held steady at 140, 142 for a couple hours, and all of a sudden now it's 120, what's that telling you? That's telling you, hey, yeah, you're starting to fatigue, but more importantly, you're starting to become low on fuel.
Interesting. I did not know that.
So that's a great troubleshooting tactic for in long runs. Hey, all of a
Yeah,
sudden, hey, it's hour 4 now and your heart rate's dropped to, maybe 10 beats or so. Sure sign that you're low on energy, and eating will bring that back up. Same in the
interesting.
race. So when we first started working together, a lot of times when athletes are starting to use heart rate for the first time, there's a certain amount of patience required for running at the lower end of the heart rate. Talk to us about that.
Yeah, I mean, I had to slow down a lot, honestly. And I had to just kind of be okay with running slower than I would normally run. But I just felt my knowledge and understanding of my body became almost like second nature. Whereas before I was running off perceived effort, and sometimes perceived effort isn't real like science. So it was cool for me to switch over because I feel like I might be a numbers person and I like to see the visual of where I'm at, and having those heart rate zones after each workout really helped me kind of understand me as an athlete. Yeah, and those zones can change too through a training block, can't they?
Yeah, so that's the key, is that, and that's why I use a 1 mile test to formulate the heart rate training zones, because that mimics a VO2 max style of effort, where now we can do a simple field test out on the track and not have to go into the lab, where the lab can be, plus or minus 10% error. Where
Yeah,
now a true field test is really true and feels real to the athlete. So we're using this 1 mile test to formulate the 8 training zones, but it's not so taxing that we cannot do it frequently. So we can do it,
yeah.
every 8 weeks or so, and to see your speed development within the heart rate, and where your heart rate is developing.
Cool. Yeah, I think it's helped me as an athlete. Plus, not everybody has access to a lab. I'd say 1% of the people that we know probably have that.
Well, and I would argue that again, because there is a plus or minus of percentage of error, that that's not necessarily the best case scenario. Is that one,
Yeah,
if you've ever gone into a lab and done a VO2 max effort, not
yeah,
only do you have something around your face
yeah,
that
yeah,
is not natural, you having to try to breathe through a tube, that's not natural. And it's a progression of effort, which is not natural. So
yep,
to go out and run around a track for 4 laps at a steady effort, kind of almost as hard as you can, that's as simple of a field test and most appropriate to what we're used to doing as you can get. And again, I would argue that the results are the same. You also have to take into consideration the time of year too. Is that a
yeah,
lot of times, unlike you, California, who have, somewhat same weather year round, if I'm starting a new athlete up in December and they're back east or somewhere cool, I have to take into account when they're testing. And if they're testing in December, hey, those numbers are going to look different than in April because
yeah.
now it's warmer. The warmer weather is going to elevate their heart rate a little bit. So I'll retest based on weather conditions as well. You've got to take into consideration the extremes. If it's super cold, your heart rate's going to be low. If it's super high, your heart rate's just going to be a little bit higher. And again, once you start to understand what those numbers mean and just get a correlation day to day, it's just something that you have with you to understand what your body's going through. You can use heart rate to detect, your fatigue levels. You
Yeah,
know,
I use that a lot.
you know,
Um,
you'll notice, if you're coming off a hard weekend, back to back runs, and Monday's your recovery or off day, and you go out for your recovery run, and you're I'm having you run in zone one anyways. But it's sometimes when you're really fatigued, you could try to run really, really hard and your heart rate not elevate. And that's a sure sign that in this situation, your legs are tired and therefore they're so tired you can't work them very hard, and that it won't allow the effort or the elevation of the heart rate to happen. Whereas in racing, it's more of a fueling aspect. So again, it's a
Interesting.
good way to detect just how you're feeling or how your legs will help you perform. And
And I
and
can
that again
detect too
too,
if I'm
even
sick.
in a another run that maybe you're fatigued in general and you have intervals that day and your heart rate's just not elevated and your legs aren't feeling good. That's a sure sign that you're just not recovered, and maybe just make it a recovery run that day and skip that workout or move it.
Interesting.
Yeah, and I think not to switch total gears, but I think one thing we need to mention is that there's so much noise out there on how important zone two is, and
Yeah,
rightfully so. It's super important. But with anything these days, with so much content out there, it just, I think, gets overrated because it's such a talking point, and there's so many other benefits to other types of running than just zone two while you're in your base building zone, while you're in your base building phase. I have you do short, fast runs.
yep.
So I think it's important to know that zone two is really, really important, but you're missing out on other types of strength that can happen during base building if that's all you're doing is zone two. Why I'm bringing this up is that we tend to think that's all we should be doing, and there's
Yeah,
some people that says that's all we should be doing.
I
But
didn't know
I'm
that.
telling you, you're missing out if you're not doing neuromuscular sprints. You're not doing short hill repeats during your base building phase. And it has nothing, if you're introducing some of that neuromuscular training, it's not going to in any way inhibit what you're trying to accomplish with your zone two training. Get away from using the formulas, because again, those are inaccurate too. And I've had an athlete for a long time who had a very, very, very low heart rate across the board. And if she used a formula, her threshold would be 15 beats higher than I had her threshold.
Oh man.
Can you imagine the overtraining that would have happened if she was just using a formula, the 180 minus your age or whatever other formulas are out there?
Get hurt, I guess, couldn't you?
Well, and it's harder also to measure progress. If you're always using a formula, you're using the same formula. You know, you're aging up once every year, but that's really not affecting much versus, hey, putting in a solid training plan and retesting and understanding how to improve ability is the key.